Okay, so let's unpack this. I want you to imagine, just for a second, that your brain is a restaurant.
Right. Very busy restaurant.
Exactly. A really busy, highly rated, incredibly popular restaurant, and it's finally closing time.
The best time of the night.
Yeah, the time where the chairs are supposed to be stacked up on the tables, the floors need to be swept, the lights need to be dimmed down to that dull hum.
Right. The patrons, theoretically, have all gone home.
Theoretically, yes. But the staff, the very people whose entire job it is to clean up, wipe down the bar, and reset the room for the next morning, they just refuse to do it.
They're just standing around.
Literally just standing around in the corners. The music is still blaring at maximum volume, the kitchen is somehow still running, grilling food nobody ordered, and the doors are locked.
That sounds like a nightmare, honestly.
It is. You are trapped inside this chaotic, noisy room, absolutely exhausted to your bones, just waiting for the quiet that never comes.
Yeah.
And that specific sensation, that feeling of being completely wired and yet profoundly, deeply tired, is the focal point of our deep dive today.
It's such a universal feeling for so many people.
It really is. And we are looking at a fascinating and honestly paradigm-shifting conversation from the source material today, which is Gary and Sage Brecka on the Ultimate Human podcast.
Right.
They map this exact frustrating human experience to a single, tiny biological mechanism, the COMT gene mutation.
Which is, I mean, it's a fundamental shift in how we understand our own behavior.
Yeah, completely.
Because for decades, the narrative has just been that if your mind is racing at night, or if you hold on to stress, or, if you can't seem to lose stubborn weight, you're basically dealing with a character flaw.
Right, like it's your fault. You just need to meditate more.
Exactly. You need stronger willpower. You need to stop being so anxious.
Yeah.
But the biology that Gary and Sage brought to the table strips all of that away.
It really does.
We are looking at the exact intersection of your genetic blueprint and your daily lived experience. What they propose is that these traits are not personality quirks or, psychological failures. They are the result of a very literal biochemical misfire.
Oh, misfire.
Right. Your body is running a set of instructions that is missing a key step,
Yeah.
leading to a profound nutrient deficiency that alters how you interact with the entire world.
And the mission today for this deep dive is to pull that biological blueprint apart and examine every single piece of it.
Yeah, piece by piece.
We're going to look at how this one single genetic glitch can dictate your sleep cycles, how it can create the most bizarre looping thoughts imaginable, how it causes you to hold on to unexplainable water weight that refuses to budge no matter how much cardio you do.
The water weight thing is huge. We'll definitely get into that.
We absolutely will, and even how it shapes your professional drive. But more importantly, we are going to explore the mechanics of how supplying your body with the right raw materials can rewrite that entire reality.
Which is the best part. There is a solution.
Yes. So to start making sense of this, we have to look at the engine room. We have to decode this specific gene, COMT. Now, it stands for catechol-methyltransferase. It's a massive word. But from what I gather from the source material, the name itself actually tells us exactly what this thing does.
It does, yeah. Let's break that word down because it is literally the foundation for everything else we're going to talk about today.
Okay, let's do it.
So catechol refers to a specific class of neurotransmitters called catecholamines.
Catecholamines.
Right. And these are your heavy hitters. We are talking about dopamine, which drives your motivation and your reward centers.
So the feel-good stuff.
Exactly. And we're also talking about norepinephrine and epinephrine, which most people know as adrenaline.
Oh, okay, fight or flight.
Exactly, your fight or flight chemicals.
Yeah.
They are the chemical messengers that get you out of bed, get you moving, and keep you hyper alert to danger.
Right.
Now, the methyltransferase, part of that long name, that's the action. A transferase is an enzyme, basically a biological worker that transfers something. In this case, it transfers a methyl group.
I'm trying to visualize this. What exactly is a methyl group, and why does moving it matter so much? Like, is it just a chemical tag?
Think of it exactly like a biochemical tagging system. A methyl group is just one carbon atom attached to 3 hydrogen atoms.
Okay, sounds simple enough.
It sounds simple, yeah. But in biology, structure dictates function. When this COMT enzyme attaches a methyl group to an adrenaline molecule, it fundamentally changes the physical shape of that adrenaline.
Oh, interesting.
Right, so the adrenaline no longer fits into the receptors in your brain and body. It's like changing the shape of a key so it no longer turns the lock.
Okay, so it's like a bouncer at a club putting a red wristband on a rowdy patron. Once that tag is on, the cleanup crew knows to escort that specific molecule out of the bloodstream and into the biological trash.
That is precisely how it works. I love that analogy. Because your brain is a dynamic environment, right? It doesn't just need to create thoughts and emotions and alertness. It must actively dismantle them.
Right, sweeping the floors after the restaurant closes.
Exactly. And this is the crucial piece of the puzzle that traditional wellness advice usually misses. The COMT gene provides the instructions to build those biological bouncers.
The ones handing out the wristbands.
Yeah. So if you have a mutation in this gene, a break, as Gary and Sage call it, your body builds enzymes that are incredibly slow, inefficient, or just downright lazy.
So they aren't handing out those methyl wristbands fast enough.
Not even close to fast enough. As a result, the adrenaline and dopamine don't get neutralized. They stay active.
They just keep bouncing around the club.
Yeah, they keep binding to receptors. They keep the kitchen running in that restaurant long after closing time.
But I want to pause on this premise for a second because it feels a bit counterintuitive to me.
How so?
Well, we usually talk about dopamine and adrenaline as good things, right? Like people take supplements to increase their dopamine for focus.
Oh, absolutely.
And we literally need adrenaline to survive. I mean, it's what allowed our ancestors to escape predators. So if adrenaline gives us energy, why did the source material frame this biochemical buildup as a severe problem rather than just, an abundance of natural fuel?
That is a great question. And it comes down to the mechanics of the dose-response relationship.
Okay, break that down for me.
So a normal, regulated rise in catecholamines creates an awakened, highly competent state.
Like when you're in the zone.
Yeah, exactly. It's the feeling of being sharp when you're delivering a public speech, or the focus you have when you're playing a competitive sport. Your body releases the chemical, you utilize the energy, and then crucially the COMT enzyme sweeps in, methylates the remaining chemicals, and brings you back down to baseline.
So you can actually relax after the game is over.
Right, you relax. But when you have a COMT mutation, there is no return to baseline.
Wow.
Yeah. A continual, unregulated buildup transitions you from an awakened, sharp state into a frightened, highly anxious state.
Oh, I see.
It pushes the central nervous system into a sustained fight-or-flight response, even when you were just sitting safely on your living room couch.
Just trying to watch TV or something.
Exactly. As Gary and Sage pointed out, if you cannot biologically break down a thought or a stressor, you become physically trapped in that exact mood. You literally cannot move on from the stress.
That is just a staggering concept.
It really is.
The idea that a thought isn't just an abstract thing floating in the ether. A thought is a physical chemical reaction, and if that chemical isn't actively degraded and flushed out by an enzyme, the thought literally stays there, echoing in the room.
Echoing is the perfect word for it.
Which connects directly to how this biological failure manifests the literal second your head hits the pillow.
Oh, yes. The sleep issues.
Right. And this is where the conversation in the source material gets incredibly relatable, but also deeply strange. I want to talk about the behavioral symptoms that emerge when the environment finally quiets down.
Yeah, because the transition from daytime distraction to nighttime silence is when the COMT mutation becomes completely impossible to ignore.
Because during the day, you're distracted, right?
Exactly. During the day, the excess dopamine and adrenaline are partially masked because you are busy. You are answering emails, driving, talking to people. You are actively using that energy to interact with the world.
But at night?
At night, the external stimuli just vanish. The body might be entirely fatigued from a long day of physical exertion, but the mind suddenly takes center stage.
Because there's no outlet for the chemicals.
Right. And because those catecholamines are still circulating at high levels, the brain doesn't just wake up, it becomes hyperactive in a vacuum.
Sage shared this incredibly specific anecdote that I think is going to resonate with a lot of people.
The show tunes.
The show tunes, yes. She's 45 years old, and she admitted on the podcast that she had this lifelong secret she had never told anyone.
It's so vulnerable, honestly.
Yeah. It really is. She said when she would try to fall asleep, her mind would just suddenly flip a switch, and she would have random Broadway show tunes playing on an endless, relentless loop in her head.
Just out of nowhere.
Yes. And the thing is, she isn't a theater kid. She doesn't go to Broadway plays.
Right.
But these songs, or random pop songs she heard on the radio at the grocery store, would just cycle through her brain at 2 a.m., and she thought this was a completely normal human experience.
She'd always lived with it.
Exactly. Until she realized that people with a properly functioning COMT gene don't have a personal theater company performing in their head when they close their eyes.
It's a fascinating neurological coping mechanism, really.
How so?
Well, when the brain is flooded with dopamine and adrenaline, it is biochemically primed for action. It is fully expecting to process data.
But you're just lying in bed.
Right, you are lying in a dark, quiet room. There is no data to process. So the brain begins to search for patterns to latch onto.
And music is a pattern.
Exactly. Music is highly patterned, predictable, and structurally rigid. The brain essentially loops these songs because it needs somewhere to channel that misfiring neurochemical energy.
Wow.
It's a harmless manifestation, but it highlights the sheer volume of unfiltered stimulation happening in the cerebral cortex.
But it doesn't always stay harmless, does it?
No, definitely not.
Because the brain isn't just looking for patterns, it's flooded with fight-or-flight chemicals, so it actively seeks out threats to justify the panic it's physically feeling.
It needs a reason to be scared.
Right. Gary mentioned a meme during their conversation that perfectly captures this specific worst-case scenario mindset.
Oh, I remember this.
It's the joke that when someone knocks on your front door, you instantly assume it is either a murderer coming to get you or an Amazon delivery of a positive thinking book you ordered to help you stop thinking about murderers.
Yeah, that meme is hilarious. But that humor really masks a very exhausting neurological reality.
Exhausting is the word.
Because the amygdala, which is the fear center of the brain, is just being bathed in unmethylated adrenaline.
Right.
When a neutral stimulus occurs, like a knock on the door, or even a vague text message from a boss that just says, "Call me."
Oh, those are the worst.
They are. But for someone with a COMT break, the brain lacks the regulatory brakes to assess that text rationally.
So they go straight to, "I'm fired."
Immediately. The biological state of panic forces the brain to invent a psychological narrative to match the physical feeling.
Right, because the body's reacting before the mind can catch up.
Exactly. The brain says, my heart is racing, my pupils are dilated, therefore I must be in mortal danger. And this cascades into physical spaces as well, completely dictating how a person interacts with their home environment.
Which brings up the intense need for external organization that they talked about.
Oh, yeah. The desk organization.
Yes, they talked about the absolute compulsion to have a phone charger in its exact precise place and getting incredibly irritated if someone moves it even an inch.
Right.
Or being physically unable to start a work project or sit down and answer an email if there are dirty dishes in the kitchen sink or a pile of laundry in the other room.
It's a very real barrier for them.
It is. But I want to challenge how we usually talk about this, because I've heard so many people casually say, "Oh, I'm so OCD about my desk," or they call themselves perfectionists.
We throw those terms around a lot.
It's too much, honestly. But listening to the biology here, this isn't a psychological complex rooted in a need for control, is it?
It is a crucial distinction. We are incredibly quick to medicalize behavior with psychological labels like OCD or generalized anxiety disorder.
Right.
And we try to treat those labels with talk therapy or behavioral interventions. But if we look at the structural reality of a COMT mutation, the intense need for a clean desk isn't a personality disorder. It is a neurological necessity for survival.
A necessity? Wow.
Yeah. When the mind lacks internal organization, which is exactly what is happening when it is flooded with excess, looping catecholamines, it fiercely craves external organization.
Well, because it's trying to balance out.
Exactly. The brain is so overwhelmed by its own internal chemical chaos that it simply cannot process one more bite of disorganized visual data.
So a messy kitchen is literally too much data.
Yes. A sink full of dirty dishes isn't just an annoyance to them. It is overwhelming sensory input that the brain literally does not have the enzymatic capacity to filter out.
So making the external environment perfectly neat is just a coping mechanism to reduce the total processing load on a brain that is already running at 110% capacity.
Exactly.
Understanding that completely shifts the landscape. It moves the conversation from you need to let things go and stop being a control freak to your brain is desperately trying to reduce external stimuli because it is overstimulated from the inside.
It creates so much more empathy when you view it that way.
It really does.
And while this mental hyperactivity creates a very difficult, rigid, and anxious reality at home, where you might snap at your partner just for moving a pen on your desk.
Right, which causes relationship strain.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
But it translates into something entirely different when that person steps into the workplace. This is where the COMT mutation becomes deeply paradoxical.
Okay, say more about that.
Well, it creates massive interpersonal friction, but it also creates the ultimate entrepreneurial edge.
Yes, this is one of the most fascinating parts of the discussion because this genetic glitch profoundly shapes professional life.
It really does.
Gary and Sage noted a very clear pattern in their business. People with this specific genetic break are overwhelmingly represented in the ranks of highly successful entrepreneurs.
Which makes perfect sense when you look at the biology.
Right, they possess a relentless drive and a hypervigilance that serves them incredibly well when building a business. But on the flip side, they make terrible, rebellious employees in a traditional corporate structure.
The traits map perfectly. If you have a brain that is constantly flooded with dopamine, the molecule of more, the molecule of motivation and seeking,
You're never satisfied.
right? You are going to be driven to build, to expand, to constantly push forward. You have a bottomless well of neurochemical fuel.
Which is great if you're the founder.
Exactly. Furthermore, because you cannot tolerate inefficiency or lack of control over your environment, you're practically forced to become the boss.
Because working for someone else is torture.
Yeah. Gary noted that if you try to micromanage someone with a COMT break like his wife, Sage, they're instantly out.
Just done.
Done. They simply cannot tolerate the restriction of their autonomy because being micromanaged introduces unpredictable variables into an environment they are desperately trying to control.
They will just walk out the door.
Literally.
It is so predictable that 10x Health, the company Gary and Sage run, actually gives all of its employees genetic tests after 90 days of employment.
Which sounds intense, but the reasoning is brilliant.
I found it fascinating, yeah. Because they don't do this to screen people out or fire them. They do it purely to understand the communication styles and the biochemical thought processes of their team.
It's an empathy tool.
Right. They use the genetic reports as a management manual. They know that if an employee has a COMT break, they cannot stand over their shoulder and critique their process.
It would just cause a meltdown.
Exactly. They have to give them an objective, step back, and let their hyper-focused brain execute the task.
It is a brilliant application of molecular biology and organizational psychology.
That's a great way to put it.
Because that same hyperacuity that makes them successful is intrinsically linked to profound sensory sensitivity.
The sensory gating system.
Exactly. The sensory gating system in the brain of someone with a COMT mutation is essentially propped wide open.
Propped open. Okay, explain sensory gating for me.
Sensory gating is the neurological process of filtering out redundant or unnecessary stimuli. Like when you sit in a busy cafe, your brain naturally filters out the hum of the refrigerator, the chatter of the people next to you, the flickering of the fluorescent light.
Right, so I can focus on my book.
Exactly. But for a COMT individual, the excess catecholamines overwhelm that filter. They hear everything. They see everything.
Which perfectly explains the amazing story they told about the meditation bed.
Oh, the vibroacoustic bed.
Yes. Gary, who does not have the gene break, buys this incredibly intense vibroacoustic meditation bed for their condo.
As one does.
Right. It has hydraulic lifts, it blasts red light therapy, and it plays loud, low-frequency sounds that physically vibrate through the mattress.
It sounds like a spaceship.
It really does. He totally nerds out over it, thinks it's the greatest biohacking tool he's ever seen, and plops it right in the main living area.
And Sage's reaction.
She absolutely despises it. The noise reverberating through the floorboards drives her completely insane.
Because her sensory gates are wide open.
Exactly. But Gary just thinks she's being overly dramatic and sensitive, until a guest comes over, a guy named Pete Vargas, who happens to have the exact same COMT gene break as Sage.
This is where it gets good.
Right. Pete gets on the bed, and he immediately hates it too. The vibrations and the noise are physically intolerable to his nervous system.
It is the perfect real-world demonstration of sensory gating failure.
It really is.
The threshold for sensory overload is incredibly low because their baseline neurochemical state is already so high. But here's the thing. The same sensitivity that makes heavy bass vibrations, crowded rooms, or bright overhead lights completely unbearable is the exact same sensitivity that makes these individuals highly intuitive, thorough, and reliable in a work setting.
Oh, because they're taking in all the data.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They notice the tiny discrepancy in a financial spreadsheet that everyone else just glossed over. They read the micro expressions in a client's face during a negotiation. They process all the data.
I want to zoom out and look at the philosophy of this for a second.
Sure.
Think about the most dedicated, detail-oriented employee you know. The person who anticipates every single thing that could possibly go wrong on a project.
We all know someone like that.
Right. Are they doing it because they possess a superior moral work ethic?
Well,
Or are they doing it because their brain is chemically forced to constantly scan the horizon for worst-case scenarios?
that is a profound question.
Right. I mean, is their success happening because of their genetics or despite the massive toll those genetics take on their body?
It is invariably a synthesis of both, honestly. But you cannot separate the biological drive from the output.
Yeah.
The hypervigilant brain that anticipates a murderer at the door because of a stray knock is the exact same brain that expertly anticipates a supply chain failure 6 months down the road.
That's wild when you put it like that.
It is. In the business world, paranoia and worst-case scenario planning are highly rewarded. We call it strategic foresight. We promote people for it.
But the personal cost.
The internal cost to the individual's nervous system is immense. They are running a high-performance engine without a cooling system.
It's like having a superpower that is actively draining your life force.
Exactly.
And speaking of the physical toll this takes, we need to transition from the neurological and professional impacts of the COMT gene to its most surprising and visibly frustrating physical impact.
The water retention.
Yes. Because the brain isn't isolated from the endocrine system. And this brings us to the estrogen band and the mystery of why standard gym routines fail so spectacularly for these individuals.
This is where the biological cascade of the COMT mutation becomes deeply physically visible.
Walk us through it.
Well, up until now, we've focused on how COMT downregulates catecholamines, dopamine, and adrenaline.
Right.
But the human body is a masterpiece of multitasking. That exact same COMT enzyme plays a magnanimous, critical role in estrogen metabolism.
Wait, really? The same enzyme?
The very same. Specifically, it is responsible for the final phase of eliminating estrogen from the body, a process that happens through what is known as the E2 pathway.
Okay, let's break down this E2 pathway because I hear estrogen and I just think of the female sex hormone circulating in the blood.
Sure.
But the body doesn't just keep the same estrogen forever, right? It has to be used and then thrown away. How does that garbage disposal system actually work?
Exactly. Hormones are chemical messengers. Once the message is delivered, the messenger must be destroyed or else the message just keeps repeating.
Okay.
Estrogen metabolism primarily happens in the liver, and it happens in phases.
Phase 1 and 2.
Right. In phase 1, the liver alters the estrogen molecule to prepare it for removal. But this intermediate molecule is actually highly reactive and can be toxic if it builds up.
Oh, so you don't want it hanging around.
Not at all. So it desperately needs to move to phase 2. Phase 2 is called conjugation, and a huge part of phase 2 relies on, you guess it, methylation.
Oh, wow. The COMT enzyme again?
Yes. The COMT enzyme comes in, attaches that methyl group to the used estrogen, neutralizes it, and makes it water-soluble so you can excrete it.
So if you have a broken COMT gene, your biological bouncers are on strike again.
Exactly.
The estrogen goes to the liver, gets processed in phase 1 into this highly reactive state, but then phase 2 never happens. The methyl tag never gets applied. So where does all that used toxic estrogen go?
It doesn't leave the body. It recirculates.
Just back into the blood.
Yes. It gets reabsorbed into the bloodstream, and this creates a severe physiological condition called estrogen dominance.
Which sounds intense.
It is. Your estrogen levels become wildly disproportionate to your progesterone levels. And one of the primary physiological effects of excess, unregulated estrogen in the tissue is that it drives aggressive sodium retention.
And where sodium goes, water follows.
Exactly. The body begins to pull massive amounts of water out of the vascular system and traps it in the interstitial space.
I want to clarify that term interstitial space because when I picture retained water, I just picture feeling bloated overall, like everywhere.
Right.
What is this space and why is the water getting trapped there specifically?
The interstitial space is a fluid-filled matrix that exists between your cells. It's essentially the scaffolding of the body.
Okay, so it's not fat.
No, it is not fat tissue, and it is not inside your veins. It's the space between the structures. When estrogen dominance forces sodium into this space, it acts like a sponge pulling water in and locking it there. It creates a dense, stubborn layer of fluid.
And the really insidious part, according to Gary and Sage, is that it doesn't just distribute evenly over the whole body.
No, it gathers in a highly specific, localized target area.
Right. They call it the estrogen band. It is this localized bubble of retained water that sits right below the belly button, moves laterally around the hips and flanks, and wraps around the back toward the kidneys.
Yeah.
And it looks, feels, and behaves exactly like stubborn belly fat.
Which leads to immense psychological defeat for the people experiencing it because they're treating it like fat.
Of course they are. That's what it looks like.
Right. So they deploy the standard fitness playbook, calorie restriction, and intense cardio.
Which just stresses the body out more.
Exactly. They wake up in a fasted state. They drink a cup of black coffee. They go to a high-intensity interval training class, like Orange Theory.
Oh, man. Orange Theory is brutal.
It is. And they redline their heart rate for 55 minutes, 5 days a week. They track every macro meticulously for 3 months.
So nothing happens.
When they step on the scale, they haven't lost a single pound. In fact, their clothes might even feel tighter.
It's a tragedy of misdiagnosis.
It really is.
It's like trying to bail water out of a sinking boat while a fire hose is still pumping water directly into the hull. You think you are fighting adipose tissue fat cells, but you are actually fighting a biochemical flood of trapped interstitial water.
Yeah, it's exactly what's happening.
But I have a mechanical question here. If this is a systemic problem with the liver failing to metabolize estrogen, why does the water gather in that specific band around the waist? Why doesn't it just puff up the arms or the chest equally?
That localization is deeply tied to the density of estrogen receptors.
Oh, okay.
The human body is not uniform. In women particularly, the lower abdomen, the hips, and the flanks have a significantly higher concentration of estrogen receptors than the rest of the body.
So they act like magnets.
Exactly. When those unmethylated recirculating estrogens flood the bloodstream, they bind aggressively to the tissues that have the most receptors. The localized hormonal response triggers localized inflammation and localized sodium retention.
The water pools where the receptors are most dense.
Bingo.
Understanding the mechanics of that is incredibly liberating. I mean, for anyone listening right now who has been punishing themselves with extreme starvation-level calorie deficits, feeling like they're just lazy or lacking discipline.
It's not your fault.
Right. This proves it isn't a failure of willpower. It isn't a failure of your diet. You cannot burn off interstitial water on a treadmill. It is a biochemical traffic jam.
It is entirely an issue of biochemical plumbing. And unfortunately, the tragedy deepens when people try to health hack their way out of the problem.
Because they try to fix it themselves.
Right. Because when diet and exercise fail, the logical next step for most people is to turn to superfoods and antioxidants to try and detox their liver. But what Gary and Sage point out is that the very items universally praised as health foods can actually act as biochemical poison for someone with a COMT mutation.
This was the most shocking revelation in the entire discussion for me. The idea of accidental sabotage.
The green tea.
Yes. Let's talk about the green tea paradox.
Yeah.
Because we all know the universal wellness narrative, right? Turn on any health podcast, read any longevity blog, and they will tell you that green tea is a miracle beverage.
Oh, yeah. It's packed with antioxidants. It reduces inflammation. It promotes cellular health.
Exactly. But for someone with the COMT mutation, a single cup of green tea can trigger an absolute physiological nightmare.
The story they shared to illustrate this perfectly highlights the danger of generalized health advice.
The Ritz-Carlton story?
Yes. They were staying at a Ritz-Carlton, and before dinner, Gary recommends that Sage order a cup of green tea. His logic is sound, based on the general consensus. It's so healthy, it's great for you.
Sure, standard advice.
She drinks the cup of tea. The immediate result. Her central nervous system goes into overdrive. Her mind starts racing uncontrollably. She feels an overwhelming, inexplicable sense of panic, and she is physically incapable of falling asleep until 8 a.m. the following morning.
From one cup of tea.
All from a single cup of steeped leaves.
Okay, we need to dissect the chemistry of what happened there, because I know green tea has a little bit of caffeine, but a tiny amount of caffeine does not induce an all-night panic attack.
No, definitely not.
What is the specific mechanism inside green tea that is causing that severe of a reaction?
The culprit is a highly concentrated natural compound found in green tea called quercetin.
Quercetin.
Okay. Quercetin is a powerful flavonoid and antioxidant. In fact, it became incredibly popular over the last few years as a standalone supplement.
Yeah, I've seen it everywhere.
Right. During the COVID-19 pandemic, Wellness influencers and doctors were recommending high doses of quercetin, often paired with elderberry and zinc, as the ultimate immune support protocol.
I definitely took that.
A lot of people did. But if you have a COMT mutation, quercetin is your worst enemy. It acts as a direct competitive inhibitor of the COMT enzyme.
Let me stop you there. What does competitive inhibitor mean in this context?
Okay, so imagine the COMT enzyme is a lock, and adrenaline is the key.
Okay.
For the enzyme to do its job and neutralize the adrenaline, the key has to go into the lock. Quercetin is a molecule that has a very similar structural shape to the binding site.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. When you consume quercetin, it rushes into the bloodstream, finds the COMT enzymes, and jams itself into the lock. But it doesn't turn. It just sits there, blocking the site.
So now the adrenaline comes along, but the lock is blocked.
Exactly. The adrenaline cannot be broken down.
Oh, wow. So for someone whose COMT enzymes are already incredibly slow and inefficient due to their genetics, introducing quercetin is like taking the few functioning workers they have left and tying their hands behind their backs.
That is exactly what it does.
It aggressively halts whatever minimal estrogen and adrenaline metabolism was actually taking place. It induces a massive bottleneck, guaranteeing a panic attack, mind racing, and a fresh wave of water retention.
Precisely. And this shatters the deeply ingrained one-size-fits-all health narrative.
It really does.
We walk into health food stores, we see a wall of brightly colored bottles labeled immune support with quercetin and elderberry, and we just assume it is universally beneficial.
Because it's natural.
Right. We assume that natural plant compounds can only do good. But the biological reality is that one person's antioxidant is another person's neurochemical poison.
Wow.
Blind supplementation based on Instagram wellness trends, without understanding your specific genetic pathways, is like throwing random parts into a car engine and hoping it runs better.
That's a great analogy. So if green tea, elderberry, and standard health advice are completely off the table, what is the actual solution?
Well, you have to be precise.
Right, because if you have this mutation, you are trapped in a body that won't calm down, won't stop thinking, and won't drop water weight. How do you fix the factory? Let's open up the biohacker's toolbox and look at the precise raw materials the body is begging for to bypass this genetic roadblock.
The protocol that Gary and Sage outlined is an elegant lesson in targeted nutrient delivery.
Yeah, let's go through it.
The overarching philosophy here is crucial. These are not pharmaceutical drugs. They are not SSRIs designed to artificially modulate serotonin, and they are not sedatives designed to knock the brain unconscious.
They're building blocks.
Exactly. They're the exact specific raw materials, that the chemical precursors that the biological factory needs to execute its own natural clearing processes.
So where do they start?
They start the protocol with amino acids. Specifically, they utilize a product called Body Health Perfect Aminos.
And Gary went into detail about why the format matters here.
He did. He noted that this specific blend is 99% absorbable.
Which is a wild statistic when you compare it to standard whey protein powders that most people chug after a workout.
Oh, absolutely. He states those can have an absorption rate as low as 20%, depending on the person's gut health.
That's terrible efficiency.
It is. Furthermore, the amino acid supplement contains all the essential aminos for lean muscle repair, but only carries 2 calories.
So it has virtually zero caloric impact.
Exactly, meaning a person can take it first thing in the morning with water, and it won't break their fast.
But beyond muscle repair, why are amino acids the starting point for a neurological issue? Like, why start there?
Because amino acids are the foundational building blocks of everything we've been discussing. They are the precursors to neurotransmitters, and they are essential for constructing the actual enzymes themselves.
Oh, okay.
You cannot build a functioning enzymatic pathway without the correct structural proteins, but the aminos are just the foundation. The most targeted, high-impact intervention for a COMT mutation involves directly supporting the methylation cycle.
And this is where the source material highlighted a remarkable compound called SAMe.
Yes, SAM.
Which stands for S-adenosyl methionine. The reaction Sage had to this supplement was nothing short of cinematic.
The phone call.
Yes. She's driving down Highway 41 in Naples, Florida, and she calls her husband out of the blue. She's practically screaming through the phone with tears of joy, saying that this massive, crushing, lifelong weight has suddenly lifted off her shoulders.
It's incredible.
She tells him she is just incredibly, profoundly happy, and this happened just 3 days after adding Sam to her protocol. How does a single over-the-counter compound induce a complete psychological rebirth in 72 hours?
To understand that, you have to look at what SAM actually does.
Yes.
Acetylmethionine is the universal methyl donor in the human body.
The methyl donor.
Right. Earlier, we talked about how the COMT enzyme needs to attach a methyl group, that carbon and 3 hydrogens, to adrenaline to neutralize it.
Right, handing out the wristbands.
Exactly.
Boy.
But where does the enzyme get the methyl group in the first place? It gets it from SAMe. SAMe is the delivery truck carrying the biochemical wristbands. When you have a COMT mutation, your enzymes are sluggish. But by flooding the system with highly bioavailable SAMe, you are essentially overwhelming the slow enzymes with an abundance of raw material.
Just forcing them to work.
Exactly, forcing the chemical reaction to occur through sheer concentration.
You are handing the bouncers so many wristbands that they can't help but start slapping them on the patrons.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
The adrenaline gets methylated, the estrogen gets methylated, and for the first time in her life, the biochemical noise in her brain simply stops.
It's beautiful. But they were very careful to include a caveat with this.
Right. Gary noted that it actually took 3 distinct tries to get her overall protocol right. And he emphasized that SAM is rarely put on a patient's very first protocol because it is so incredibly potent.
That trial and error is a vital point for you to understand if you're listening to this and wanting to try it. You are tinkering with the delicate machinery of the central nervous system.
You can't just dive in.
Right. If you introduce a massive dose of a methyl donor too quickly, and the downstream pathway, the pathways that take the crash out once it's bagged aren't clear, you can induce a totally different kind of anxiety.
Oh, because the trash is piling up at the door.
Exactly. You can cause methyl trapping. This is why biohacking is an active, iterative process. Your genetics provide the map. They show you where the bridge is out, but you still have to drive the car and feel how it handles the detour.
You have to pay attention.
You have to listen to your body's feedback and adjust the dosages.
It shifts you from being a passive patient waiting for a doctor to hand you a magic pill to being an active, scientifically observant participant in your own biology.
That's the core of their message.
It's empowering. And alongside the SAM, they utilize TMG, which is trimethylglycine.
Right.
This can be taken in the morning or at night, and its job is to continuously aid the methylation cycle, acting as a backup methyl donor.
Just keeping the system running.
Right. They also rely on a very specific sleep formula combining melatonin, magnesium, and L-theanine to calm the nervous system at night.
A classic stack.
And finally, they mention a critical compound, 5-MTHF, or active methylfolate.
Methylfolate is essential because the COMT mutation rarely exists in a vacuum. It frequently travels alongside another genetic trait called MTHFR.
MTHFR. Okay.
Right, which impairs the body's ability to convert folic acid from food into its usable active form. By taking 5-MTHF, you are bypassing the broken conversion process entirely and handing the body the exact active folate it needs to keep the methylation cycle spinning.
Which brings us to the most nuanced, intricate, and arguably the most critical warning in this entire deep dive.
The B vitamins.
Yes, because if you get this next part wrong, you can actively unravel all the progress you've made. We have to talk about the hidden dangers in your B vitamins. We need to decode the B12 nuance.
Yellow versus red COMT.
Exactly. Let's break down the difference between a yellow and a red COMT mutation.
This is where molecular precision is absolutely paramount. The source material explains that the COMT mutation is inherited, and the severity of the enzymatic break depends entirely on your specific inheritance pattern.
Right. So what does yellow mean?
If your genetic test shows a yellow COMT, it means you are heterozygous. You inherited the mutation from only one parent. Your enzymes are slow, but you still have some baseline function.
Okay, and red.
If your test shows a red COMT, you are homozygous. You inherited the mutation from both parents, meaning the enzymatic bottleneck is severe and highly restrictive.
And that color coding doesn't just indicate severity, does it? It directly dictates the exact specific chemical structure of vitamin B12 you are allowed to consume.
Yes.
B12 is essential for nerve function and energy, but it comes in different forms. If you have a yellow COMT, your system has a bit of flexibility. You can tolerate methylcobalamin, hydroxycobalamin, or adenosylcobalamin.
Because you have some enzyme function left.
Right. But if you have that red COMT, the double inheritance, the biological rules are incredibly strict. You must take hydroxycobalamin or adenosylcobalamin. If you take methylcobalamin, you will crash.
The underlying chemistry explains why that happens.
Break it down.
Well, methylcobalamin, as the name implies, already has a methyl group attached to it.
Okay.
For someone with a yellow COMT, that extra methyl group is helpful. But for someone with a red COMT, their system is so incredibly sensitive and easily bottlenecked that handing them pre-methylated B12 can actually overstimulate the receptors.
Is it too much?
Way too much. It's like pouring gasoline on a fire that you are actively trying to put out. It induces severe agitation, insomnia, and rapid heart rate.
That sounds awful.
It is. However, amidst all this complexity, Gary and Sage provided one absolute, universal rule that applies to every single human being, regardless of their genetic status.
Right. Everyone must avoid cyanocobalamin.
Cyanocobalamin, yeah.
It is the synthetic, man-made, incredibly cheap form of vitamin B12. Sage stated plainly in the video that taking the synthetic form will literally turn her into a crazy person.
Her words, yeah.
And I have to push back on the reality of the supplement industry here because this makes me furious.
It's very frustrating.
Most people just walk into a grocery store feeling a little tired. They see a plastic bottle with a bright label that just says B12 and they throw it in their cart. They have no idea what the prefix is.
They assume it's safe.
Exactly. The fact that a standard, widely available over-the-counter vitamin contains a compound that can unravel your sanity and trigger intense neurological distress is terrifying. Why is it even on the shelves?
It is on the shelves because it is incredibly cheap to manufacture and it has a very long, stable shelf life. But look at the word, cyanocobalamin.
Cyano.
It is a cobalamin molecule bound to a cyanide molecule.
Literal cyanide.
Yes, literal cyanide.
Mm.
Now, the amount of cyanide is infinitesimally small. It won't poison you in the traditional sense.
Okay, but still.
Right. But the body recognizes that cyanide is toxic and it must clear it out.
Mm-hmm.
How does the body detoxify and clear a cyanide molecule?
By using a methyl group.
Exactly. By using a methyl group.
Oh my God. So you are taking a vitamin to gain energy, but the vitamin contains a toxin. To clear the toxin, your body has to spend a methyl group.
Yeah.
But if you have a COMT mutation, you are already desperately, dangerously deficient in methyl groups. Taking the cheap vitamin is literally robbing your body of the very raw materials it needs to calm your brain down.
It is a net negative transaction.
That is just, wow.
Exactly. You are chemically bankrupting a system that is already in debt. This raises the most profound question of our entire analysis, really.
Yeah.
Think about the scale of this. How much of the daily low-grade anxiety, the chronic brain fog, the insomnia, and the emotional volatility that millions of people experience every single day is simply the result of cheap synthetic supplements clogging up their genetic pathways?
Probably a massive amount.
Right. We have been conditioned to assume that all vitamins are universally benign. If you feel bad, take more vitamins.
Right, they can't hurt.
But Gary and Sage's deep dive proves they are not benign. They are incredibly powerful biochemical signaling molecules that can either heal your pathways or destroy them.
So to keep it safe and simple, the takeaway is clear. Anyone looking for B12 should turn the bottle around, look at the tiny print on the ingredient label, and ensure they are only putting hydroxycobalamin or adenosylcobalamin into their body.
Absolutely. Read your labels.
It is wild how minor chemical differences, just one or two atoms attached differently to a molecule, can drastically, visibly alter your entire psychological and physical reality.
It really highlights how interconnected the mind and body are.
We have covered a massive amount of physiological ground today. Let's trace the arc of this journey.
Let's do it.
We started with the deeply bizarre reality of having random Broadway show tunes keeping you awake in the dead of night, and dealing with unexplainable, hyper-localized water weight around your waist that no amount of intense cardio can touch.
Right.
We stripped away the psychological labels and discovered that it all traces back to a single genetic blueprint, the COMT gene, that fails to produce the enzymes needed to break down stress hormones and estrogen.
The bouncers aren't working.
Exactly. We realized that your daily, universally praised cup of green tea could be acting as an accidental trigger for panic, and we found that targeted amino acids, compounds like SAMe, and highly specific non-synthetic forms of B12 can restart the biological factory, quiet the chaos, and restore absolute order to the brain.
It's a full circle journey, and the ultimate takeaway here for you, the listener, is one of immense hope and radical empowerment.
Yes, empowerment.
Feeling miserable, suffering from a constantly racing, vigilant mind, being paralyzed by the need for external perfection in your home, or struggling to lose stubborn fluid retention. These are not acceptable or inevitable consequences of getting older.
Nope.
They are not unchangeable character flaws, and they are not psychological failures that require years of therapy to manage.
They're just missing ingredients.
Exactly. They are simply the result of missing raw materials. As Gary and Sage demonstrated through their own lived experience, providing your body with the exact molecular nutrients it is begging for can change the entire trajectory of a life.
It really can.
It can calm a turbulent mind, unlock your energy, and literally save relationships, just as understanding this biology brought profound empathy, calm, and partnership to their own marriage.
It truly is a paradigm shift of the highest order. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over, building purely on the implications of the science we've unpacked today.
Oh, this is a good one.
Think about Sage on Highway 41. Think about her calling her husband, crying tears of relief and joy because she finally felt profoundly, effortlessly happy after just 72 hours of taking a supplement called SAM.
Yeah.
If taking a specific form of a B vitamin or adding a bioavailable methyl donor to your morning glass of water can literally remove a lifelong defining feeling of obsessive-compulsive dread and transform you into a deeply relaxed person.
It really makes you wonder.
Where exactly is the boundary between who we are as a soul and the chemical nutrients floating in our bloodstream?
That's the big question.
Are our core personalities, our deepest quirks, our late-night anxieties, and our greatest entrepreneurial talents just the accidental byproduct of our enzymatic efficiency?
It's a fascinating thing to think about.
Think about that crowded, noisy restaurant in your brain. Maybe you aren't an inherently anxious person by nature. Maybe your staff just finally got the mops they needed to clean the floor. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the biological information the world hands you, and we'll see you next time.